Welcome back to another episode of Opal Wave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH and helping you tune your deck to your meta. I'm your host Jacob, and today we're going to be looking at Raggadragga Goreguts Boss, which is a 4-mana Gruul 4/4 human boar creature. With each creature you control with a mana ability gets +2/+2. Whenever a creature you control with a mana ability attacks, untap it. Whenever you cast a spell, if at least 7 mana was spent to cast it, untap target creature, it gets +7/+7 and gains trample until the end of turn. And this commander is super sweet, really wants to utilize mana dorks and high casting spells to overrun our opponents and in the game that way. Can also do some really sweet combos that we'll get to in the battle and glory versions of the deck. For all of you Fire Emblem fans out there, I think it would be cool to have an altar art of Dimitri. If you know, you know. But anyway, as usual, the decks are in the description below, and let's go ahead and get started. So for the Skirmish version of Raggadragga, we're just running a bunch of mana dorks. Got a few 3-drop guys, we got some 2-drop guys. Dream Hunter and the Exuberant Firestoker are both pretty sweet. They have mana abilities, but they also give you extra value if you have a creature with power 5 or greater. So if you do cast a spell with power 7 or greater, and you can pump them up with Raggadragga's ability that will trigger at the end of the turn. Super sweet. And we've got some finisher type cards like Enraze, Forerunners. We've also got the Worm Calling and the Fanning the Flames. Since these cards do have buyback, the buyback cost is included in the total cost of the spell when it counts towards Raggadragga's ability. So we'll be able to get this back into hand after spending mana into it, untap one of our dorks, and just make them very large so we can swing at our opponents. Another really cool include is this Cavalier of Flame. It has pay 2 creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. It can also kind of wheel ourselves a little bit, get some of the cards we don't want in our hand anymore. Since we are pretty dork heavy, extra lands can sometimes gum up our hands, so this is a really cool way for us to get rid of those. Another really cool include is the Soul of New Phyrexia. It has pay 5, permanent you control again indestructible until end of turn. And since with Raggadragga, whenever we attack with our mana dorks, we'll be able to untap them. It will be able to have our mana up for Soul of New Phyrexia's ability most of the time, so it's pretty sweet there. A few other ways, like the Thicket Elemental and the Wolfbriar Elemental, so we can pay the kicker costs. And again, these kicker costs do count towards Raggadragga's last ability, where you need to pay at least 7 mana into it. You can get some extra utility out of these. Enraze Forerunners, another really sweet way for us to close out games. It's going to pump up our creatures even more, and in addition, it costs 8, so it'll make one of our other dudes super big. Moving on to our sorceries, I already touched on Fanning the Flames and Worm Calling, which are super sweet. Allows us to continuously make our dudes bigger every turn if we really want to, and in our later versions, these are going to be key in some of our combos. Shamanic Revelation, really great draw spell. Some more stuff like Fight with Fire and the Vastwood Surge, so we can kick her and get that last trigger on Raggadragga, Blasphemous Act, so we can wipe the board. With our instants, we've got a Comet Storm. Pretty easy for us to get to 7 on that. We've got the Wild Surge, new card from Baldur's Gate. Really sweet. A few other removal spells, Braid, Beast Within, Return to Nature, Urza's Rage, another thing that we can kick to deal a bunch of damage to someone, make it uncounterable if we do kick it. Strength of Juru, so we can pump up our guys even more. Resuscitate and Rapid Vigor, so we can regenerate our creatures. And much like with the Soul of New Phyrexia, since we know when we attack, we can untap our dudes, we will be able to have mana to activate the ability on Resuscitate, most likely, and Rapid Vigor, pretty easy there. Return of the Wild Speaker can be an overrun type effect, or just draw a bunch of cards if we've pumped up one of our dorks really big with Raggadragga. Moving on with the artifacts, we have a ton of ramp. Like, that's pretty much our entire deck is mana dorks, so we can kind of skimp on our artifact ramp a little bit. We've got the Soul Ring, it's a classic. And the Life Crafter's Bestiary, whenever you cast a creature spell, you get to pay 1 and draw a card. So a great way for us to get some card advantage out of our dorks, and our dorks can then pay it forward and pay for the next creature that we cast and draw more cards. Since we are going to be attacking, we've got a Beastmaster Ascension, so eventually all of our dudes will get +5/+5, in addition to Raggadraggas +2/+2, so our creatures are getting +7/+7. We're going to be ending games pretty quickly there. Guardian Project, so we can draw some more cards. Rhythm of the Wild and Fires of Yavimaya to give our dorks haste. We got the Jugan defends the temple because the first ability makes a dork, and then everything else is just extra cake on top of that. Leyline of Abundance, it's a pretty sweet card. Even if we don't get cheated in at the beginning of the game, all of our dorks are going to produce extra mana when we tap them. Super sweet there. And with our lands, pretty basic here. We've got some really sweet lands that we can use to kind of pump up our creatures, things like Kessig Wolfrun and Castle Embereth, for example. And since you swing with your dorks and then you get to untap them, so then you can tap them again and use their mana to activate some of these abilities. Pretty sweet. And because of the way Raggadragga works, if we turn our lands into creatures, they will still have that mana ability, so they will get the bonus from Raggadragga's plus, or the +2/+2. So we've got the Lair of the Hydra, a Raging Ravine, and a Gitu encampment, all great ways kind of just keep applying pressure, maybe after a board wipe or something like that. And also the Treetop Village in addition to that. Moving on to the battle version of Raggadragga. As you see, we've kind of upgraded. We're not running as many of the 3-drops or the 2-drops just because you don't really want to be running, as you're moving up in power levels, you don't want to just run them just because they have the ability. You want to make sure they have a little bit more utility, or they're a little bit lower to the ground. Since we are running dorks, we get to add the 1-drops here. We've added some of the 2-drops like Devoted Druid, super strong. Marrow and the Nurturer, which makes mana based on its power. Heron Blade Elite also makes mana based on its power, as well as the Viridian Joiner and the Selvala Heart of the Wilds. We've added a few more finishers, things like Craterhoof, Cabal, Heart of Krosa can make our lands into dorks, which then Raggadragga will pump up, and then they'll get an additional pump from Kamal's ability, so super sweet there. Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, this deck can produce a ton of mana, so that formidable cost won't be that hard to hit. Since we are a creature deck, we'll have a ton of creatures out, and then from there we'll make our opponent's life totals really low and swing out at them. A few ways for us to draw cards, since we do want to be swinging with our creatures like Oran Frostfang, Toski, Bearer of Secrets. Again, we've got that Beast Whisper in the deck still, and we've added a Hellkite Charger. So when a Hellkite Charger attacks, you may pay 7 mana, and if you do, untap all attacking creatures, and after this phase there's an additional combat phase. So with Raggadragga's ability, we swing out with our dorks, we get to untap them, then we can tap them to activate Hellkite Charger's ability, and from there we can make infinite combats. And we have a few ways to, most of our dorks produce green, but we do have a few ways like Radha, Air to Kill. When it attacks, it makes double red, so it's very convenient in paying the double red on the Hellkite Charger. We've also got like Birds of Paradise or Paradise Druid that can make red for us. One really important card is this Orochi Leaf Collar. So it has pay green, add 1 mana of any color. A great way for us to filter our green mana into red mana so we can pay for the Hellkite Charger's cost. And then we have a few other of the equals to power creature like the Heron Blade Elite or the Selvala that can potentially just make any color that we want to. Another way that we can combo in this deck is with the Timur Sabertooth. So if we have one of our dudes that makes mana equal to its power, Viridian Joiner, Selvala, Heron Blade type stuff, we can bounce a 7-drop or greater to our hand, like the Regal Force, the Nyx Moom Ancient, or the Craterhoof, and cast it again, and Raggadragga's ability will trigger, and we can pump up one of our guys even more. So eventually they're just going to be, so like the first time they're going to be, let's say Heron Blade is a 1/1, hasn't had any +1/+1 counters on it. It's going to get +2 from Raggadragga. So now it makes 3 mana on its own. Then we're going to cast our Craterhoof. It's going to trigger Raggadragga. Heron Blade is going to get +7/+7, and now it produces 10 mana. So from there, we have 10 mana, so we can tap it for 10, bounce our Crater Hoof, cast our Crater Hoof, because that's just enough. And then from there, we can untap our Heron Blade and give it another +7/+7. But now it's a 17/17, so we can tap it for 17 mana. In addition to, you know, making all of our dudes infinitely big, we'll also have a Crater Hoof. So definitely a great way for us to end the game. We can do the same thing with the Regal Force. So this will draw out our deck, or we can just draw enough cards until we hit something else that we can use to end the game, whether it be the Crater Hoof or the Nyxbloom Ancient. Really great way for us to end the game. Since Raggadragga does give trample, you only need 3 creatures on board. When you assemble this combo, and you can just swing at everybody for infinite. Another really sweet interaction with the Fanning the Flames and the Worm Calling. It functions very much like the Crater Hoof or the Timber Sabertooth combo, but all you need is the Heron Blade or the Selvala. You can also do the Viridian Joiner Forces with the Orochi Leaf Queller if you want to do the Fanning the Flames, since you can turn all that green mana into red mana. So you'll cast the Fanning the Flames, X equals 2 with the buyback cost, so its total is 7. You get to deal 2 damage to anything, and then with Raggadragga, we'll be able to untap one of our dudes. And from there, we can either make all of our dudes infinitely big with trample, or we can just deal infinite damage to the table. This also works with the Devoted Druid. Really interesting interaction. So you put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid to untap it. So once it gets +7/+7, we can put 7 more minus counters on it to make 7 more green mana. So if we have the Orochi Leaf Queller plus the Devoted Druid, we can turn that, obviously we can turn that green mana into red mana. And then from there we can execute the same combo. The only difference is that we have to keep putting the plus onto Devoted Druid, because we have to keep giving it the minus counters. So it's always going to get +7 and then -7, +7, -7 over and over and over again. If you have the Worm Calling, you don't need the Orochi, and you're just going to end up with a bajillion worms basically. So it's got a buyback of 3 plus the one that you have to spin into it, so you're at 4. So you're going to make infinite 3/3 worms at a minimum. And then if you have one of our haste enablers like Fire of Yavimaya, or the Rhythm of the Wild doesn't work, but if you have a Fires of Yavimaya, you can just end the game right there. And moving on to the sorceries, we've still got the Blasphemous Act. We've added an Eldritch Evolution so we can tutor. Genesis Wave, when you can produce as much mana as a deck like this can, this card is super sweet. Shamanic Revelation, so we can draw. Vandal Blast to deal with our opponent's artifacts. And Goreguts Recovery, since we've got a bunch of dorks, we can make a little bit more room for some of these MDFCs. Moving on to the instance, some slight upgrades going on here. Heroic Intervention, Silk Guard for protection. We've still got the Rapid Vigor, since we don't have to pay the extra mana like you do with the Resuscitate. Beast Within, Chaos Warp, so we can deal with whatever. Comet Storm, a really great finisher if we end up making infinite mana and we need a way to win post-combat. Wild Magic Surge again. This card is pretty sweet. Krosan Verge and, Krosan Grip. And we've added a Savage Beating, so if you entwine this card, you're paying 7 mana for it. And this card will do a ton of damage, potentially. And we've also added Signal the Clans. Since we do have 3 creatures that, are kind of key to our deck right here, we can just tutor for all 3. Moving on to the artifacts, we've got a Soul Ring still, and the Great Hinge. A great way for us to gain card advantage and gain a little bit of life here and there. In the enchantments, we've still got the Beastmasters. We've got the Fires of Yavimaya and the Rhythm, so we can still gain haste. Guardian Project for extra card draw, and the Leyline still for the extra ramp. And the Asceticism. This card's super sweet, makes our creatures really hard to interact with from our opponents, and then it's got that pay to regenerate target creature. Just like the other deck, since Raggadragga's ability is going to untap all of our dudes, we can pretty safely swing into players and then untap our guys and keep up protection with the Asceticism. Super sweet. With the lands, we've done some slight upgrading, added Spire Garden, Stomping Ground, some extra ways for us to get our lands entering untapped. We've added the Beseiju, really great card, Kessig Wolf Run. We've still got that in the deck, and some of the other ways for us to animate our lands and apply just a little bit more pressure on our opponents. Other than that, nothing too crazy, since we've still got a ton of ramp going on in the deck, and it's 2 colors, so upgrading the lands isn't too hard here. Before I move on to the glory version of Raggadragga, if you've enjoyed the content and you feel like you gained a little bit more perspective on power levels in EDH, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out my Fiverr. That'll be in the description below. And with the glory version of Raggadragga, which is essentially our cEDH version, we have added a Vivian Monsters Advocate, and this card is super sweet. You get to look at the top card of your library anytime, and you can cast creatures from the top of your library. The +1, you make a 3/3 beast, and the -2 is where the real spice happens. -2, the next creature spell you cast, you can search your library for a creature with lesser mana value and put that card into the battlefield. So this way, it's a really sweet way for us to tutor up our combo pieces, since we have a few A+B combo pieces, like a Shia plus either Carrion Ranger or a Scrub Ranger, or Dockside plus Timber Sabertooth, or we could do Hyrax Tower Scout plus Timber Sabertooth, depending on our board state. Really sweet card, gives us some card advantage, and it can also just tutor up some of our win cons. So we've upgraded our creatures pretty heavily here, and we're not, just as I said before, as we move up in the power levels, we're not really just running dorks just because they have mana abilities. We're keeping in pretty much the most powerful mana dorks that we have access to. Most of the 1-drops, obviously, Priest of Titania, Selvala. If they cost more than 1, they're most likely producing more than 1 mana. We've added a Destiny Spinner as a way to make our guys uncounterable, and funny enough, it can turn our lands into creatures. So if we have a Gaia's Cradle, we can turn the Gaia's Cradle into a creature and then start untapping it with Raggadragga's ability, potentially as another way for us to combo off. Then we've got an Eternal Witness as it's a great card. We can use it with Timber Sabertooth loops potentially, and then from there we can beast within all the permanents on the board, and then lightning bolt all the beasts that they got, or braid all the beasts they got. And we've also upgraded the dragon to Aggravated Assault. It's much cheaper in terms of its casting cost and the activated ability. And we've still got the Arachi Leaf Collar, so we can filter some of the green mana that we make and make that combo just a little bit easier to pull off. We've added Kogla as another way to bounce some of our creatures. We do have a few humans in the deck, Hyrax Tower Scout being one of them. This one's super sweet, especially if we have a creature that's tapping for like 6 mana or something. Not too hard in this deck, since we can do some pretty crazy shenanigans. Then, as I said before, we've got the Ashaya plus the Scrub Ranger. So if you're not familiar with how this combo works, you return a force you control to your hand to untap target creature. They both have this ability. So with the Shia, all of your lands are force in addition to their other types. So you can return the Carrion Ranger or the Scrub Ranger to your hand to untap one of our creatures that produce more than 1 mana. So as long as you're, if you're producing, at least 2 mana, the Carrion Ranger is going to go infinite, and if you're producing at least 3 mana, the Scrub Ranger is going to go infinite. And then from there, we can use a few of our outlets, or we can just do like Beast Whisper to draw our deck. We've got a few different ways. And then we've also got the Dockside plus the Timber Sabertooth as an extra way for us to combo. And again, we've got the Beast Whisperer, so we can draw out our deck with that combo, or the Professional Facebreaker with the Infinite Treasures. We can sack the treasures, exile our library, and then just find the cards that we need to kill our opponents. As far as our big drops go, we've really reduced our 7+ drops, and the only one we've really kept is Regal Force. I just kept this one in because it's gonna draw us cards outside of the context of the combo. If you wanted to, you could probably just keep the Nyx Bloom or the Craterhoof, whatever you know. I just chose it because it's gonna draw you the cards, and it's better outside of the combo. Crater Hoof, there could be an argument that, you know, you could use that to just straight up in the game. I like a little bit more utility in my creatures than that. We've also added a Twin Shot Sniper, which can be an outlet if we've got the Timber Sabertooth interaction going, and this card is just really great as far as interaction goes. It's got channel, pay 2, discard Twin Shot Sniper. It deals 2 damage to any target. You're not really casting the spell because it's channel, so your opponents cannot counter it, but they can like deflecting swat the ability. It's pretty sweet if we want to interact with like an opposition agent or an Aven Mind Sensor, since we do want to do a good bit of tutoring in this deck. We've also added an Endurance so we can deal with Thassa's Oracle in a pinch, since this is tutorable, and also just, you know, hit players' graveyards. We've also got the Scavenging Ooze so we can hit players' graveyards as well, stop players from doing Underworld Breach shenanigans. And a Fauna Shaman, really strong way for us to tutor out a lot of the important creatures in our library. Moving on to the sorceries, we've added a Finale of Devastation, Natural, Order. We've still got the Eldritch Evolution. So with the Tooth and Nail, it's already costing 7, but you can entwine it for 9. And if you already have one of your dudes out that makes mana equal to their power, you're going to give them the extra power. Obviously with Raggadragga's ability, untap them, and then you can get like a Hierarch's Tower Scout plus a Timber Sabertooth, and from there you can make infinite mana, infinite creature ETBs, or you can get Coggle plus Hierarch's Tower Scout. If you don't even have one of those, you can get like Timber Sabertooth plus Dockside, or Ashaya plus Scrib Ranger or Current Ranger. There's a few ways for us to just straight up win the game once we resolve a Tooth and Nail entwined. We've also got the Turn Timber Symbiosis and the Shadow Skull Smashing. Both can trigger Raggadragga, depending on how much we pay into the Shadow Skull. We've also added a Mizium Mortars. This card's super sweet. Deal 4 damage to target creature unless you overload it. There's not too many creatures that have more than 4 toughness in the context of cEDH. It's going to be a one-sided board wipe, and since we are in 2 colors, it's not going to be too hard for us to hit that 3 red mana. And like I said before, we got the Natural Order. A lot of our important creatures are green, and we have a lot of dorks, so we can sacrifice one of our dorks to find an important creature if we really need to. With our instants, we've just done a little bit more streamlining. Added a Nature's Claim, Veil of Summer, Autumn's Veil, make it harder for our opponents to stop us when we are trying to combo. Pyroblast, Red Blast, and a Deflecting Swat so we can do a little bit more interacting on the stack. Shared Summons, fantastic for finding some of our A plus B combos, and a Worldly Tutor for extra tutor power. With the artifacts, we have added a Null Rod in addition to our Collector Oof, so we can really, you know, hit those artifact strategies pretty hard. Then we've got added a Mana Crypt and a Chrome Mox just to make us go a little bit faster. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with like turn 1 Mana Crypt Null Rod just to really mess with your opponents. We run enough dorks in the deck that we can play around this effect really easily. Moving on to the enchantments, like I said, we've got the Aggravated Assault. It's just a much cheaper version of the Hellkite Charger, and we don't need to swing, obviously, with the Aggravated Assault first, so the turn we put it down, we could potentially just win immediately. So, added a Carpet for a little bit extra ramp. Kindred's Transformation is a way to just deal with any creature on the battlefield. Rhythm of the Wild still in the deck makes our creatures uncounterable, and can give our non-token creatures Riot, which is essentially haste or +1/+1 counter. Survival as another way for us to tutor, and a Sylvan Library for extra card draw. With the lands, we're definitely doing a lot of upgrading here. Added some really important lands like Cavern of Souls and Gaia's Cradle. Funny enough, we do have a good bit of humans in the deck, so we can use this to make them uncounterable. Gemstones, so we can get ahead just a little bit on mana. Emergent Zone, super sweet card. Basically, we can use this to surprise win on top of other players. And then we've added a bunch of fetch lands so we can find our dual lands ASAP. Added a Soken Sun just as extra, if we need to apply extra pressure on the board or just get some extra dudes out, Soken Sun can definitely do that for us. And then just a few more ways for us to guarantee that we will hit either of the colors that we really need. So thanks for checking out this episode of Opal Wave MTG. Again, I am your host Jacob, and until next time.